is on the way to
It's the remarks of the witness are inaudible because of the microphone is not close enough. President of Court, could you please get closer to the microphone, both of you? Attorney General, what does this picture show?
This is the entrance to Auschwitz, and when the heads were shaved and when we ceased being women.
This is what it looked like?
Yes. SS men.
President of Court, who is the barber woman?
When we entered Auschwitz, they were Jewish women. There were only a few German women in camp. They were Vorarbeiterin and Kapo.
President of Court, we heard that sometimes men perform this work. Do you know of these cases?
Yes, this was later when we came to Birkenau camp.
And it took this form?
Yes.
Attorney General, what does this picture mean to you?
The crematorium.
Is this what it looked like?
The witness nods.
President
in
of Court,
assent.
it was called Koya.
Yes.
Attorney General, that's the Revere, the infirmary.
Yes, this is the Revere.
President of Court, who is this nurse? Was she Jewish?
Yes, a Jewish woman or some other prisoner. I never saw an SS marking on a dog.
Attorney General, what does the whole picture recall to your mind?
Beatings. This is how it looked.
It says capo here, and the capo had these special
yes, they
armlets.
had an armlet with the word capo on it.
And what is this, please?
This is the food being distributed to the inmates. It was not always as calm as it is on this picture. It sometimes went along with beatings. Like in this picture, yes.
President of Court, and what happened here in this case? Attorney General, the inscription says you have a little soup, you will get more in the evening. What is this, please? Is this a penal march, penal parade?
Sometimes we were ordered on our knees for no reason at all, not in punishment.
And hands above your heads?
Yes, hands raised.
What is this? Attorney General, was this a physical examination to discover eczemas? Do you remember this?
Yes.
And here you are kneeling and leaning your hands on the floor, and the SS people come by and examine your bodies?
Yes.
And beat you up?
This is how an inspection looked.
And this here?
This is a selection.
President of Court, was that called sorting? Sortierung?
Sortierung was the word, not selection.
Mr. Hausner, and that was the journey by trucks?
Yes, this is the loading onto the trucks.
And is this an inmate handing a crumb of bread to another inmate?
prisoners, men and women.
Is this what a beating looked like?
Yes, this is how it looked. And also,
President of Court, with a whip?
an oxtail in their hands. A real oxtail in the hands of the SS men. That is how I got 25
Do you remember
lashes.
how an electric current was passed? Ah, no, you did not see that, so you cannot tell us about it. And the administration of a punishment by beating during a roll call, is that what it looked like?
Yes, this is when strokes of the lash were meted out in punishment.
And with the body exposed?
Yes, naked.
And what is this? President of Court, actually I should have asked this before. Did Dr. Savatius see these pictures? Dr. Savatius, it will be enough for me to take a glance at it later. And this is gymnastics, sports, what they call.
Yes, this is drill.
And is this committing suicide by touching the electrified wire? Did you see many such cases?
I saw many such cases almost daily.
And this is the hanging of women during parades? Did you see that?
I saw this once only, when a woman was hanged this way in Auschwitz. She tried to escape and was caught.
And is this the evacuation? President of Court, why do these women not have the prisoner's garb? Is this what they wore usually?
When this girl tried to escape, she was in the clothes of an SS woman, not in the clothes of a prisoner. They caught her, brought her back to Birkenau, and hanged her there.
And is this the march when Auschwitz was evacuated and you were among the evacuees?
I was not in Auschwitz, in the Auschwitz march. I was in the march to Mauthausen.
But this is what it looked like, more or less?
Yes.
I am submitting all of these sketches. President of Court, who drew this? Attorney General, we received it from Mr. Dobkin from the Jewish Agency. It was given to him. It was drawn by a released inmate, a woman. We could not locate her. President of Court, Mrs. Alexander, you may return to the witness stand. I have marked the book of sketches as Exhibit T1346. I have completed my questioning, Your Honor. President of Court, Dr. Savatius, any questions? Dr. Savatius, I have no questions of this witness. President of Court, thank you, Mrs. Alexander. You have completed your testimony. Shalom. I now call on Mr. Bock. Mr. Hoch. President of Court, to the usher, would you remove the water glass a little bit? To the witness, do you speak Hebrew?
Put the cap on your head, please. Right hand on the Bible. And say, I swear by God that my testimony in this trial will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Your name?
Nachum Hoch, H-O-C-H.
You may be seated if you choose. Mr. Hoch, you live on Ben Yehuda Street, 49 in Haifa.
Yes, I do.
You were born in Romania.
Yes.
In the year 44, you were sent from Transylvania to Auschwitz.
Yes, from the town of Borsha. Borsha in the Carpathian area, in the Carpathian passes.
It belongs to Transylvania, then?
Yes, it does.
You were, you, your father,
my father, my mother,
your mother, your
yes,
brother, and 3 sisters.
Yes, 3 sisters.
You were the eldest.
I was the oldest child, yes.
Did any one of them survive besides yourself?
Unfortunately, no one survived.
After the selection, you were separated from your family.
When we reached Birkenau, I was separated from my father. Earlier, mother and the other children were separated, and then my father was taken away. My father still managed to give me his long raincoat because it was cold. And then he was taken to the left, and I was taken to the right, to Birkenau, with those who were left alive.
What year were you born?
1928.
You were also in this selection with a yardstick.
The selection of the stick was the second selection.
You passed through the selection.
Experienced that selection.
We have already heard testimony in regard to this. What happened after this Yom Kippurim, this Day of Atonement, when you tried to get an additional ration of food?
I tried to obtain an additional ration of food. I did not get it. I merely tried. The upper part of my body was put in an oven. Those who were in Auschwitz, what they had there at Auschwitz, and I was beaten on the lower part of my body with a stick that was very thick, the sticks which they used to carry the lunch pails. First they gave me 10 strokes, I fainted, water was poured on me, then the second group of blows, of 10 blows, was hailed on me, I fainted again, they poured water on me, until I received 25 blows. I could not move anymore. They left me right there, and to this day I wish to apologize, Your Honors. I can only sit on the left side, I cannot sit on the right side because of these blows.
Did you have any broken bones?
No, the bones were not broken, but I have a piece of flesh completely mutilated, a red wound to this very day.
What happened about 3 days before Simchat Torah, the last day of Sukkot?
3 days before the festival of Simchat Torah, we were taken to the F camp for washing and disinfection of clothes.
You were taken from the children's block?
Yes, from the children's block, from the remaining children. We were washed, The clothes were disinfected. We were taken back to the same block. On the next day, there was a roll call in the camp. And as we were standing outside in this roll call, SS people with machine guns surrounded us and transferred us to the blocks number 11 and 13, or 9 and 11.
Will you please raise your voice?
SS men surrounded us and took us as we were to the blocks, to the barracks 9 and 11 and 13, and there we were kept for 2 days without any food. Our condition there was well known. It was 4 or 5 months after our arrival at Birkenau. During the first transport, when the children were taken, we still did not know where they were being taken. We thought to work, perhaps. But in the second selection, we already knew the final destination, because they were locked up in these same blocks 11 and 13. This time, as soon as they placed us into those same blocks, the barracks which were notorious as a so-called quarantine, just before people were taken to the crematorium, we knew what was in store for us. On the second day, in the evening, it was the eve of the festival of Simchat Torah. We planned, 10 children we were, we planned some kind of a break out of these blocks, even if it would be merely demonstrative. We planned in these barracks, in this barrack, they had doors, locked doors on both sides, and there were 2 guards.
How many boys were in the block?
About 1,000. Those who were left from the original 3,000.
Up to what age were the boys in the block?
Between 14 and 16. Mostly we were from Hungary, from the remnants of Hungarian Jewry who were brought in May, June and July.
All the boys agreed to this plan of mutiny.
The planning was done by 10, but after we had laid these plans, it was brought to the attention of the others, and since there were these 2 guards, the capo and block seniors at both doors, the main door and the back door, one of the boys would have to try to climb a pillar to the windows near the roof, and then one of the guards would probably come from one of the doors to stop the boy. At that moment, a part of the boys would have to make a break for that gate which was left.
You had no arms?
No, we had no arms,
and you knew it was a hopeless attempt?
Yes, it was partly demonstrative, and perhaps we hoped that part of us could be saved.
That a number of you would be able to
save
save
a part
themselves.
could be saved. Maybe we thought a part could be saved.
You have executed this plan of yours.
Yes, it was at midnight, and it happened just as we had planned it. As soon as one of the boys tried to climb the pole, the pillar, the guardsmen from the front door came to get him down. And then the first group of people made a break for the front door. At that moment, the second guardsman from the back door came in order to prevent the people from breaking out of the front door.
Do you know what happened to the boy who climbed this pillar?
Yes, the boy was taken to the gas chambers later when I saw that. And then we made a break outside. It was at night. Some kids dispersed among the other barracks. Others hid in the latrines, in the toilets. I hid between a stove and a roof in the bathhouse.
All the children burst out of the huts.
Almost all the kids. On the next day, there was a camp curfew from 4 a.m. when people were about to leave for work. They were not permitted.
Curfew, you mean?
Yes, curfew. And this took until they rounded us up, all of us. It was about 10 or 11 a.m. Then they ended the roundup, and they put us back into the same barracks 11 and 13.
We're all caught.
All of them. They kept the curfew up until they caught all of us. At noon, about noon, they brought 2 barrels of boiled potatoes. It was the 3rd day, the festival of Simchat Torah. We had not had any food earlier, and they brought 2 barrels of borscht, of beetroot soup. And 3 children from among these 10 planners came out and spilled the barrels with the potatoes and the beetroot soup. We spilled it on the floor in the presence of the camp commander, who brought the food. It is my view today that this was to have been a deception, because we knew that whoever would come out from the transport to other camps, these people would get food, better food on the day. This probably was to have been a deceptive trick to make us believe that we were being taken out of camp.
When you thought you knew what was waiting for you, what was in store.
We knew what was happening, what was about to happen. Of course, the camp commander left. Then we immediately got off and charged, went for these potatoes and so on. This hunger strike was to have been a demonstrative step to show them that we knew what was awaiting us and we were not falling for this deceptive trick. About an hour or less went by, the front door was opened, and we were told, "You are free, you can leave now." We began running out. As soon as we left the barracks, there was a curfew outside, and the SS with machine guns surrounded us from all directions. They came out from between the barracks and placed us in columns of 5 and took us outside of camp. All of that was in Camp Z, in the Zigoiner Lager, the gypsy camp. As soon as we were taken out of camp and led in the direction of the crematorium camp, we knew very well what place this was. We had been there 5 or 6 months. We stopped and we did not want to go on. They began shooting at our feet. We moved on up to the gate of crematorium number 3. And around the crematorium there was a fence made of wood in the form of squares and cubes, very tall, so it hid the interior. We got up to the gate to the crematorium compound. Again we stopped. We did not want to enter. Again they began shooting, but again at our feet only. We entered inside. We were in a hall, a big hall, that looked like a bathhouse. On the walls all around us, there were hooks, and on each hook there was a serial number. They asked us to hang our clothes on these hooks. They demanded.
You said they requested. I understand this was not the correct word.
They
demanded.
Ordered us to hang the clothes. We didn't refuse to undress. Then they began shooting inside this hall. And then they ordered us to undress and hang up our clothes on the hooks and to remember the serial number they told us. They told us when we would come out, we could tell where to take our clothes from. Of course, this was deception, and we knew that. We undressed and we threw the clothes on the floor in the middle of the room. Later, we were taken, we were put in columns, rows of 5, Yes, groups of 5. And I remember this as if it were today. One of the Sonderkommando people there came up to us and said, "Chevre, boys, at least don't show that you're worried. Sing."
That you are children.
Don't show that you are anxious, that you are worried. Go ahead and sing.
The question was, well, President of Court, Attorney General, that they should not see the fear.
I don't know what he meant.
No,
he was a Jew. He said it in Yiddish. He said, "Chevre, sing. Boys, sing." I don't know the exact words, but he told us to sing. Part of us, we were frozen. We could not utter a word, like myself. I could not speak a syllable. Others began reciting a confessional prayer. And others really sang. They took us through a little antechamber. They opened a big door. And they put us into this hall. In that hall it was completely dark except for a small beam of light which came through the door where we had come in. We were already inside. They shut the door behind us, and then I heard for the first time the weeping for the first time. For some time, I don't know whether these were seconds or minutes, they again reopened the door and we were told to come out again to the same camp where we had been before. We were directed into one part of the hall, and then the SS commander, a tall man, I think maybe it was Hess, I don't know for sure. It was the same officer who had first separated me from Dad when I had arrived at the camp.
You mean the commander of the camp? Hess?
I think it was Hess, but I'm not sure. He called the first boy in the line, grabbed him, checked his muscles, and ordered him to make 10 knee bends, then to run to the wall and back, and then turned him around. We were facing left, he turned him to the right.
Where was that?
It was in the same room where we had been kept previously.
The room where you undressed?
Yes, where we were sitting previously. After we were taken back from the gas chamber into this hall, then he called another boy, and this was the same boy who had climbed that pole. He happened to have been from my town. Zalmanovich was his name. And he asked him how old he was. He was a short boy. He asked him, "How old are you?" And he said, "Almost 100. And he said, "You pig, is that the way to speak? We'll send you right back to that chamber." And the third boy, I was the third boy. I was frozen. I looked at him. He ordered me to make knee bends, then run to the wall and back. And he sent me to the right again, like the other boy. This way he selected 50 boys. In the middle of this selection process, the other boys saw that a selection was taking place for something, and they began infiltrating to that right side. And the SS men separated us and would not let them pass to the other side, cross over to us. At that time, before they separated us, this same boy who told us to sing previously from the Sonderkommando, he came and we asked him, what are they trying to do? Give us stronger gas? And he said, this is the first case I have encountered here. The first yes, that I have encountered here where people are being taken out of the gas chambers alive. Yes, and he said, I wish I were so safe as you 50 people are.
Judge Halevi, who said this?
This same man from the Sonderkommando who had earlier told us to sing. After the selection was over, he ordered us to turn with our backs to the door of the gas chamber. And at that moment, all the remaining boys were ordered back into the gas chambers.
How many children were there?
I think there were 900 to 1,000 boys then. 900 to 8,000 boys. To 1,000. And we were ordered, they locked the door, we heard the door being shut, and our group was ordered to dress.
The 50 boys?
Yes, the 50. And the 900 were inside. And the moment we were ordered to dress, we began looking for our clothing. But of course it was not important any longer. We took whatever there was. And we were dressed, and we were led out straight the same route which we had come. We were taken out of camp to the railway station. There we were ordered to get onto freight trains which were loaded with potatoes, and we had to empty the wagons, take the potatoes off the wagons and bury them in the ground. Then we knew what the reason was why we were taken out from there, because there was a shortage of manpower to unload these potatoes.
And all the others were gassed at that time.
All the others were gassed. I have never met a single one of these children later. Out of our group of 50, there were 3 of us who are now in this country, 2 in Haifa, and I am the 3rd one.
Where?
No. 1 is in Jaffa, 2 brothers are in Haifa.
The name is known in the incident. The incident is described in the literature describing the Holocaust. You are 2 brothers?
No, it was not I and a brother of mine. These 2 kids in Haifa, they are the brothers.
Dr. Savatius, any questions? I have no questions. Thank you. You completed your evidence, Mr. Hoch.
Gedalia Ben-Zvi.
Mr. Gedalia Ben-Zvi.
אני מבקש שקט באולם. מי שרוצה לצאת שיצא מהר. שים את הכיפה על הראש. אני נשבע באלוהים.
And repeat after me, I swear by God Almighty that my testimony in this trial will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. What is your full name?
Ben-Zvi Gedalia.
Ben-Zvi מקף?
Ben-Zvi hyphenated?
בלי מקף.
No, not hyphenated.
אתה יכול לשבת, מר בן-צבי, אם אתה רוצה לשבת.
You may be seated, Mr. Ben-Zvi, if you wish to. You live in the Ein Hod village?
Yes, I teach painting.
When the Second World War broke out, you were in Slovakia,
I was at Bratislava in Slovakia.
and from there you were deported to Majdanek.
Yes, I was taken to Majdanek.
When was that?
On the 25th of March, 1942.
And after 2 months in Majdanek, you were taken to Auschwitz.
I was taken to Auschwitz with a specially selected transport.
Why was it selected?
There were rumors that they need laborers to a certain factory in Germany, and this as an excuse. They were searching for craftsmen and experts. They took 26 doctors, 50 children to be apprentices. Amongst those young men, I was one of them.
President of Court, how old were you then?
I was 16.
Would you describe the occasion of your arrival at Auschwitz?
After a journey which lasted a number of days in freight trains, 40 men to a train, we arrived at Birkenau, not Auschwitz, but to the Ramba of Birkenau, which I came to know later.
Maybe this is the time for us to ask you a question which maybe I have not sufficiently clarified to the court. What is the difference between Auschwitz and Birkenau?
I can describe it briefly. The difference lies in the fact that Auschwitz, the Stammlager, was near the town Auschwitz. The Birkenau camp was 6 kilometers away in the fields, and at that time in 42 was only at its early beginnings and was only being built at the time. The large huts were not there yet, only the old housing.
And in the course of time, what did Birkenau develop into?
Birkenau turned to be the main camp, which held most of those who came to Auschwitz. Auschwitz, comparatively, was a small camp. There were 24 structures there, 24 buildings.
Where were the crematoria located?
The crematoria were all in Birkenau. Later.
Yes. Where were the gas chambers?
The gas chambers were in the crematoria buildings in Birkenau.
What is Auschwitz I, Auschwitz II, and Auschwitz III?
Auschwitz I was the camp, the Stammlager, divided, separated by a large stone wall to a men's camp and a women's camp. Number 2 was the women's camp. Later, the wall was removed and it all turned to be a man's camp. Auschwitz III, I don't know why it was called Auschwitz III, but Birkenau I know. Yes, most of
you
my
were
time.
in Birkenau most of the
Yes,
time.
most of the time I was in Birkenau.
What was Birkenau?
Birkenau was an enormous camp stretching over a large area where the SS camps, those who guarded the camps, were also there. There was the German hospital.
President of Court, did you say a troop hospital, a field hospital?
Yes, the German SS hospital.
Am I wrong in saying that usually it is considered that Auschwitz II is Birkenau?
I do not know if Birkenau can be called Auschwitz II. Birkenau was called Birkenau.
Please carry on. I have interrupted you.
The camps were divided. The old camp, which was in my time when I arrived, was the camp which was later called Frauenlager. They took the men out of this camp. This was divided into 2 parts. the right hand, there was a road in the middle. There were the men, and to the left, the women. Across the road, they started building Birkenau in this Pferdestall in the stables. The division was, there was a road separating the SS camp from the prisoners' camp. Then there was Camp A, which was known the quarantine lager. All people after selection were brought into this camp.
President of Court, what was the German name?
Quarantäne lager. Then there was Camp 2B. The Czech Jews were kept there.
Was that called the family camp?
Yes, the Familien lager. Then there was the Z-Lager, the Hungarian camp, mainly Hungarian women. Before this camp was full to capacity and they had to build another camp, camp number 3. This was in 1944, when the Hungarian transports arrived. There was also a road, a famous road, which led from the train to the gas chambers. Then there was the men's camp, our camp known as Lager D, the day lager. Then there was the Zigeuner lager, the gypsy camp. And all the gypsies were brought to that camp later. Also when I was at Auschwitz. After this Zigeuner lager, the gypsy lager, there was the Revier. This was a camp where the buildings were a little better, they were not stables, there were windows there. These Feldestallbaracke were built without windows. There was a stove in the center and only one opening. This was intended for people, not for stables, asks President of Court. Answer, yes. But there were inscriptions, Feldestallbaracke number so-and-so. President of Court, there were no horses there. Answer, no, there were no horses. After this S-Lager, there was Brzezinski. This was a special camp before the sauna where people would be washed. This to the left and to the right, there was crematorium 3 and crematorium 4 across. Between the two, there was this ground I just described.
And there were also some other labor camps in the surroundings.
Yes, there were labor camps all around and people would be sent out. They spent a certain time there and then they were taken to the gas chambers. Those who were already exploited and could work no more.
How do you know the topography of the place so well?
I can say, first, I have a good memory. I worked in a commando. Beileitungsmagazin was supposed to repair tools and then divide them out to the various camps. So that with this commando, I actually toured all the camps. We were a mobile labor unit.
The Große Postenkette, I see.
Yes, this is how we were called. The chain, the large chain of the guard.
You have a relatively low number. What is your number?
My number is 37017, my tattoo number.
And how would you estimate the whole area of Birkenau? How large was it?
I cannot estimate the area, but I can well imagine that in Camp B3, until the end of the old camp, there would be some 8 to 10 kilometers. And this also, in the other direction, that is,
about
I
8
would say,
kilometers.
a square of 8 by 8.
8 by 8, you said?
Or 10 by 10.
In all directions? That may say between 60 to 100 square kilometers.
Approximately.
You passed through the quarantine when you arrived in the camp. What was it like?
At the time, the quarantine camp did not exist yet. We were simply taken to one of the stone buildings, and we were told that since you are arrivals from another camp, you will have to be closed in this building for 4 days, not come out to work, and not to come in touch with the other inmates. Actually, this meant no food and no drink.
How long did it take?
About 4 days.
And after these 4 days?
After these 4 days, we were put into different labor groups. Those who remained in camp were caught to drag and carry the dead in block 7, to bring to block 21, the block of the dead, then to be loaded onto carts and cars. And the Russian prisoners, who were not many at the time, they would take them on and
you were
lead them away.
With your brother-in-law, who was a physician?
Yes, I was with my brother-in-law, who was a doctor, on the same transport.
And he helped you during the first period. What was his fate in the end?
He was killed. This was the commando, which used to leave camp with 300 men, and only 150 would return. They were digging the graves for the dead.
I see. What happened to the others who went to work?
The others were killed by the guards, by the SS men. They were shot on all kinds of pretexts. He would throw an object and order the people to run and catch it up, and then have a pretext for shooting them down.
Food was not sufficient. What were you doing then?
I remember a case which may sound strange, but behind the blocks in the old camp, there was a big dog on a leash belonging to the block Führer, the SS men in charge of this block. This dog always had a plateful of food, better than the food given to us. So my brother-in-law suggested that we come up to the dog. My brother-in-law teased him, and at that moment I approached and drew away this plate with the food, but the dog noticed and never budged. They were heavy porcelain plates, white.
You were employed in taking the corpses out of the death chamber.
This work was given to those who did not succeed to get getting into one of the commandos. This was considered a work, a paying job, because after the work was over, each one of us was given to drink a kind of black liquid called coffee in that camp.
Did many survive later?
At that time, only a few survived because of the sicknesses, the diseases, and the lack of food. In 42 conditions were very bad, and few remained alive. Also, the SS men killed them down in a very wild way.
One evening at the roll call, they called out your number.
Yes, one evening they called out my number with numbers of 12 more men. the reading out of numbers usually spelled ill omens, but this time somehow...
people were not called by their names, only by their numbers, I understand.
Yes, only by their numbers, no names, but we had a feeling this was a good omen. When I came to Birkenau, we were tattooed on the chest. Later, they began tattooing on the arms.
You had numbers on your breast, on your chest, I understand.
Yes. On the following morning, we walked some 6 kilometers and taken to Auschwitz, to the Stammlager, with this large gate with the Arbeit macht frei inscription. This was a very modern camp. After the sauna and the disinfection, the changing of clothes, we were taken to Block 11. This was the punitive unit. In this block, besides the Jews, there were Poles. This was a strange block, a kind of camp within a camp. After the roll call, this block was closed and the inmates were not allowed to walk the camp itself. The gallows were inside that block, as well as the wall where people were put up against to be shot. In this same block, Jews had a special position. They were treated differently by the Germans and by the Poles. The Poles called us Żydki, and the Germans Zaujuden. And even when all the camp, the inmates were free after the roll call, we had to keep on standing. We were taken into the hut also in a kind of way called spot. There were stairs, and after the people were quite exhausted with the lie down, rise and all kinds of drill, we were supposed to skip all the way to the hut.
In German?
No, not on one foot, to put our hands on our waists and to jump on both feet into the hut.
Why were you sent to that Strafkommando?
I cannot say up to now. We did nothing to justify this punishment. We were just selected, 12 men besides myself. There were those taken to the Buna Commando and other commandos.
What was Buna Commando? What did it mean?
This Buna Commando, this was a very large labor unit, left the camp every morning at 3 before dawn to build factories for synthetic products not far from Auschwitz. After work, I met people coming back late. They told us that they were taken by cars, half an hour's trip, and they were forced to sing on the way. They had shoes, but they were not allowed to wear the shoes. They had to carry them in their hand. They were forced to walk on crushed stone. Many of them died, the feet were swollen, and those who could not stand any longer on their feet were sent to the gas chambers.
And when you when you were doing that physical exercise, as it were you doing it in front of the SS men?
Yes, there were the SS men giving the orders.
And what was their reaction to these gymnastics?
Usually this was accompanied by strokes of the whip, of the lash, and also with their sticks.
Were there mass executions in that block, number 50?
One of the worst things we experienced during our hours of rest were the mass executions. We knew about those mass executions because we were told everything in that block. There was an order and all those in my hut were taken to another room facing the street, not the courtyard, in the same building. In this way, they could crowd into one cell, at least 150 men, into a cell which could hold 30. We had no air to breathe. I do not mention the fact that we could not sit down, we had no standing room, but we could not breathe. So that when the order came to go back to our hut, we were relieved and happy.
There were fixed days earmarked for the mass executions.
Executions took place once or twice a week on fixed days. I cannot remember the days. But I remember that on a day of executions, cars would start arriving with S-men, all men, large numbers of them. Then we knew that this meant an execution.
How many people would be affected?
I cannot say exactly, but some 2 cartfuls of dead were being taken at night by the prisoners through the back gate of this building. I believe some 100 to 150 people at a time.
And was it under the eyes of the senior SS officers?
Yes, this in the presence of high-ranking SS officers. We saw it by their insignia and their ranks. They did not need 20 or 30 high-ranking officers for the executions.
What was the system of those executions?
From what we heard and from what I knew at the time, a group was taken into the courtyard. They were ordered to face the wall, a black wall at the end of the courtyard, and they were shot at the back of their neck.
They were shot? Did you see it? Asked the President of Court. Where were you then?
No. I was at the time in the room facing the road.
I see.
And all the men were taken to the rooms facing the street.
And after the execution, you could still see the bodies in the yard?
No, it was difficult to see, but the courtyard was full of blood even on the following morning, although they tried to clean the courtyard or to spread sand over the blood stains, but this did not help.
Do you know what Stehbunker means? Let me say the standing bunker, as it were.
In the same block, there were cells in the cellar. A number of them were occupied by the SS men. We had no contact with them. On the left, there were the famous standing cells, standing bunkers. This was a very small cell. I cannot describe the size. There was an iron door with a small window, and a man who committed an offense, any offense according to the laws of the time, would be ordered to report in the evening in block number 11. Then he would be taken into one of these cells. He would have to crawl to get into the cell. Then he would stand up with 3 other men, so pressed together that they could not bend
Was there
their
any
knees.
ceiling there?
There was a window, a very small window facing the courtyard.
Were you inside ever?
Yes, once. I was not in block 11 at the time. I was a carpenter.
Where?
The Deutsche Ausrichtungswerte. This was a factory for wooden cases.
All right, we shall reach that point, but now I'm interested in the standing bunker, the Stehbunker. You arrived there, I understand.
I was kept for 3 days in this Stehbunker. Once we were on our way back to camp. I was, as all the others. I went to the side of the road to do my personal needs, and an SS man saw me. He slapped my face twice, took down my number, which was tattooed on my chest and inscribed on my trousers. After a week, when I was on the roll call, my number was called out. I knew this meant punishment, either strokes of the lash or the standing cell. I reported in the evening to block number 11, and for 3 days I stood in this cell without sleep.
During the nights?
3 nights. In the early morning, we would be taken from this standing cell to the block. At the time, it was block 4.
And you were taken to work?
To work, yes. The danger was that those whose punishment was a longer time, 2 or 3 weeks, could not withstand the stress. They would give way after a short time. Only the couples and the prominent men who could sleep the day after the standing all night in that cell could regard it as a light punishment.
That means they were also punished this way? They're also detailed to that standing bunker?
Yes, strangely enough, they were also given this punishment, although they were never whipped.
There were also good block Älteste at Auschwitz?
Yes, there were decent block Älteste at Auschwitz, and there were the bad ones. The good ones could, and many of them did help, even risking their own position and their own lives to help their prisoners. They had ways of helping, and many of them did.
But there are others as well.
Of course, there were others.
What is Canada? Not, of course, in the geographical sense, but in the Auschwitz vocabulary. What did it mean?
Later, when I was still in the Stammlager at Auschwitz, a friend told me to whose bed I came one night, and I saw he was eating something rare at the time, a slice of lemon. I asked him, "How did you get this?" He said, there was a command called Canada, and they have everything in that commando, even lemons. I asked, "How can one get in?" He said, "This is a matter of good luck." There were groups in the morning, and each group tried to get into a commando which was known as having good food. This is how I tried to get into this famous commando of about 100 men. This was the Aufräumungskommando. The nickname was Canada. This because there was plenty in that commando, all that taken from the people sent to the gas chambers.
Aufräumung means cleaning.
Aufräumung is the cleaning or the scavengers unit.
To what work were you detailed in that particular commando?
I was kept busy at the time on odd jobs. At first, transferring the objects which were brought, the personal objects from the Rampa, from the stables or the Feldenstahlbaracken. We would put them up in piles. Later, we were kept busy opening the trunks, the personal belongings, and sorting them out. Food separately, clothing separately. Objects of value were taken to the SS lazarette, to the SS men. Clothes were being sent back to the stables, the Feldestall Baracken, and their girls would be sorting them out and making parcels, and then
Again,
they were
this
sent on
word
for
invasion, says
disinfection.
President. Quoted.